This week, I had the honor of speaking with none other than Annie Lamont, arguably the most influential female venture capitalist in the world and the First Lady of the state of Connecticut. As the co-founder and managing partner of Oak HCFT, she's built one of the leading venture firms focused on both healthcare and fintech, managing over $14 billion in assets total since its inception. Throughout her career, she's helped back and scale industry-defining companies such as Athena Health, One Medical, Village MD, and Netspend. Annie has been recognized on the Forbes Midas list multiple times, Modern Healthcare's 100 Most Influential People, and Institutional Investors FinTech's Finance 40, cementing her status as one of the most respected figures in venture capital. Beyond her investing success, she has played a pivotal role in healthcare and fintech landscapes, helping companies lower costs, improve outcomes, and drive innovation. Annie and I spoke about her start in venture capital, her investments, Oak HCFT, her thoughts on the future of healthcare and fintech, and her advice to the younger generation. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and it was very fun to make.
Thank you for joining me, Annie. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here with you. My daughter was at Greenwich High. Love Greenwich High.
Look at that. So I want to start your early career in your education. So can you tell me a little bit about your childhood, what your upbringing was like, and how you ultimately ended up at Stanford?
Mm-hmm. I grew up in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. It's a small suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Kind of an idyllic childhood. I'm the youngest of six, so it was great. My parents paid no attention to me. I got in all sorts of trouble, and as long as I had good grades, no problem. And I ended up at Stanford. In part, I just wanted to go to a good school, warm weather, applied to UVA and Stanford, and those were the days when you could just apply to two schools, and it's fine. And I'd never been to California, so I got myself out to California, went to Stanford. It just happened to be the most amazing time to be there because it was right as Steve Jobs was creating, the first Apple, and it was just a super exciting time because Silicon Valley, surrounded by Stanford and in part inspired by Stanford, ended up being. It was really the early days of the formation of the tech world.
And after that, you ended up at Hambrecht Quist. And there you went on the Apple IPO roadshow, you worked with Genentech. What was that environment like? What did it teach you?
Yeah, I thought, it's funny because people, I would say after college, they're like, oh my gosh, you go into finance and it's, I think people have this vision of it's all numbers. I am a math person, but it's all numbers and it is not creative. And I think what was really cool about it was one, we were actually working with young tech companies, and in the first 3 months I was there, I got to know Bob Swanson. The Genentech, for those who don't know, was the very first biotech company to go public. And so that happened in my first 3 months out of school and working with him. And then I carried Steve Jobs bags on the Apple IPO roadshow. So I was just hooked. Like, these were amazing, people to work with. So I got the benefit of getting exposure to young, entrepreneurs, but also learning a lot about the financial system and all these different companies. And I think that it's a little bit like consulting and finance, because you just learn about all these industry sectors and management teams and the financial world and how it works. And so it was an incredible 2-year education.
Yeah. And at one point, I think about 1.5 years in, you decided you wanted to be a venture capitalist. And there's a very interesting story of how you essentially ended up at Oak. So how did you end up at Oak? And how was it different than other firms at the time, other than the fact that it was on the East Coast?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say, this is as you're thinking about your careers, like, you can't always plan everything. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and then I realized that was probably not the best career, for me. And I would say this is where you just kind of have to go with your instincts about what you love and like and people you like. And I really did decide I had to work with entrepreneurs, and I wasn't the entrepreneur, but I could be the editor supporter. And life just is funny this way. I literally the elevator opened in my building. Somebody I had worked, known at Stanford, an acquaintance, not a close friend, but acquaintance, was in the elevator. He happened to work for a venture capital firm in the building. We went out for just had a drink. I told him I wanted to be a VC like him. The next day, he was working on this Victoria's Secrets magazine, catalog deal. And he called Oak Investment Partners that was in Westport, Connecticut, and said, "Hey, do you want to invest in this catalog company with me, Victoria's Secrets?" And they said, "No, we don't do that. We just invest in technology, but we're looking for a research associate." And he volunteered my name. And 1 week later, the lead partner at Oak Investment Partners in Wisconsin was in San Francisco. He revered Hambrecht Quist, the firm I worked with. And we met and he hired me. And 3 weeks later, I moved to Westport, Connecticut. And it was just, one of those like life literally, 1 minute later, and I wouldn't have run into Mike and I never would have been introduced to Oak and Westport. And these things are just, I truly believe in fate and just following your heart on these things. And people say, well, like my friends were like, wait a minute, you're leaving San Francisco for a suburb of Connecticut, like you're never going to get married. Well, within a week of being in Westport, Connecticut, I met my husband, Ned Lamont, and he happened to, through friends, he just moved there to start up Cablevision of Connecticut. So it just all worked out. That's why I love Connecticut so much.
Yeah. And when you started at Oak Investment Partners, what was the first kind of sector you were involved in terms of investing, and how have the sectors you've been involved with changed throughout your career? Because if I remember correctly, you were in life sciences first, now it's healthcare and fintech. What kind of sectors have you been involved in?
Yeah, I actually started, the very first was software, but there was only one public software company then. There were very few software companies to invest in, but they were, starting to be built. And I love that area. But what I realized was that I needed to create my own niche that was sort of, unique within Oak. There were some engineers, tech, it was a tech-oriented group. And I wanted to just be differentiated, honestly. And I want to do something that I could get excited about. And I could get excited about life sciences and biotech. And it was the early days. So there wasn't much competition. I hired a PhD to work with me. And we just, we said, let's look at neurology, and then identified two individuals that were trying to start neurology biotech companies. One in ALS, which was near and dear to my heart. A friend was dying from it, and and the other one in dealing with memory and other neurological diseases. And they both ended up being quite successful. Alkermes and Cephalon, one was sold for $7 billion, one is still in existence and a multi-billion-dollar public company. And it was just it is good to be somewhere before other people are. You don't have to be as good, honestly. And so I owned for that niche within Oak for 10, 15 years. In 99, with the advent of the internet, 99, 2000, there were 5,000 biotech companies, 4,000 of them were public, and there were literally 5 approved drugs, and which meant that it was a lot harder to actually get drugs to work and get through the FDA than people thought originally. And I just decided it was going to be a rough decade. And I think it was really excited, having worked in the healthcare system, that I just wanted to focus on lowering costs and improving quality and outcomes for individuals. And I just felt like with the advent of the internet, you could have cloud-based software. Invested in the first cloud-based software company, Athena Health, which is now, other than Epic, the leading ambulatory electronic health record company, as well as RCM company out there. And so just pivoted to another area, which I think is a critical piece of my success and longevity in the business, is constantly striving to figure out what's the next great thing and getting there before others and investing in it and working and not being afraid to like redefine yourself, repot yourself.
And in the pursuit of finding the next great thing, you're always going into new industries, you're always going into new sectors. And although you've made the point many times about you focus a lot on the CEO, you focus a lot on the person, and you just said you hire a PhD and you hire people to look into the intricacies of the business, you still have to know a little bit about the business itself and how the industry works. So when you're going into a new industry, healthcare, life sciences, fintech, how do you learn about the industry? How do you understand everything you can possibly?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a lot easier now with Gen AI and the internet. It's, it's absolutely amazing how much information you can get. I mean, I love it. You can learn about things so quickly. Um, I would say it really, even back then it was, and obviously with the internet did exist. It wasn't, as comprehensive as it is now. When I first started and work focusing on healthcare software and life sciences. Um, it's literally getting to experts in the industry, talking to people, networking, going to conferences. Um, it is really primary research, which I really love because you get to know companies. And once I've built up a bolus, I've invested in over 100 companies in these spaces. You just know you are like a participant in the industry. You are almost like the entrepreneur because you know so much about the connectivity of all these different elements within the healthcare industry. You get to know like the customers, the buyers of the companies. And, healthcare is 20% of the economy. Fintech, depending on how you define it, is, 30. And yet the people that actually run and power these industries there's probably 300 people you need to know um, at the end of the day. So that's it. It does end up being a small world when you've been in it a long time.
And it's ultimately in the end a people business. But so
100%.
yeah, so you went from Oak Investment Partners, which is now folded, to Oak Healthcare and FinTech. What were the biggest turning points that led to you going off on your own with Oak HCFT, and what were the big turning points?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there were two issues. One, cultural. Andrew Adams, my partner, who worked with me in healthcare and fintech at Orc Investment Partners, and I worked very collaboratively, very sort of partner-based, team-based, intellectually honest. You cannot solve problems if you don't highlight problems and work through them together. You always want to be questioning, yourself, and it's good to have, like somebody to bounce off of. And I would say there was a cultural piece with the technology group. We were just very separate. They were investing in certain areas. We were investing in very different areas. There really was no benefit to being together. And the way they worked was like the old-fashioned Jedi Knights. Like we're all, just out here doing our own thing. We don't need a talent team. We don't need marketing. We don't need anything. We don't need associates. We're just gonna have good judgment and like make investments. And the reality is they didn't reinvent themselves. They didn't repot themselves. They just kept doing the same thing over and over again. And it wasn't successful. They were in the end not making money. And I think just culturally different and we had a view of like, we want to be the best going forward. Like we want to just keep pushing ourselves and adding to the team in ways that are substantially better. And so, we decided to split off, create Oak HCFT. As you said, Oak Investment Partners sort of died after that. We created Oak HCFT, which I'll call Oak, because it's a lot easier to say than the other. And it's been super fun. It's like our own startup. There are now almost 50 people. We've got these two practices. We've built literally the best talent team of 5 people in the business focused on specifically healthcare and specifically fintech. And we've got an amazing marketing team. We've got groups. We've just hired the chief product officer from a company called Oscar Health, who's going to, is full time, is going to be helping all of our companies like embed AI in what they're doing and think about that in different ways. So, we've hired a product person from Square and Stripe, who's also, working on the tech side with our companies. So it's just, it's really fun and exciting. And we just have a sort of team-based, like it's sports culture, it's just team-based. We all want to win together. We want to be individual stars, but we really have to succeed as a team. We have to care about the enterprise ultimately and care about our entrepreneurs more than anything.
And high level, what are the main principles that shape your investing in Oak?
So what in terms of as we think about an investment, what are the most important factors, or is that what you're asking? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it starts, you mentioned before, I mean, it starts with the CEO on the team, and just particularly the founders. And that is everything to us, because you can't really predict like what's going to happen to, especially an early stage business, may look quite different than what you originally thought. And you know, you got to have the market right. You got to have a certain level of product market fit, but you have to be working where the tailwinds are right, and you have to recognize if a business model isn't working, how do you pivot to get it to work? And I'd say, you know, it's really the CEO has to be a Pied Piper. People have to want to follow them. They have to be like when they come in, when I'm talking to them, I want to feel like that person knows more about this problem than anybody in the world. Like they have studied this problem, they understand it, they understand the customers so well. And they're just, you know, like the intensity has to be there, right? Of just like they are going to, you know, maybe not Elon Musk intensity off the charts, you know. I mean, he's an amazing entrepreneur. I'll give him that. But you know, that level of intensity and somebody who's so intellectually curious and so confident but not arrogant that they will ask a million questions. And they're, you know, they'll ask, but then they're able to decide. They're not paralyzed by all this input. They're like, okay, I've asked the questions I need to ask. I'm going to decide and move forward. And then correct, you know, course correct along the way. But that takes confidence. And with, you know, again, without arrogance, because it's sort of like you're so confident you don't mind ask every dumb question. You know?
Yeah. And over the last 20 years, what are a couple of the companies that you believe have had the most impact on the way people live today that you've invested in? And what was the story behind investing in them?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, you know, it's interesting because I invested in the first for-profit hospice company years ago. And then 20 years, 25 years later, 30 years later, I invested in the most successful palliative care model. And I think, you know, if you think about end of life, I think anybody's experienced that hospice is a beautiful thing and an incredible support for a family. It's also, if you look at palliative care, which hospice is true end of life care, like, you know, supposed to be like the last 6 months, 3 months. Palliative care is that journey, you know, where you can somewhat predict in the next year, year and a half, whether somebody is going to pass with pretty great certainty. You know, this company Aspire created algorithms around it and connectivity to people's primary care doc. And they could look at a payer data and say, this person is probably likely to die in the next year. And I think something like that where you know that the patient and the caregiver in the home is struggling, like they're they're probably going to the hospital multiple times, you know, that emergency rooms multiple times. I mean, I've experienced it. I had one year 7 times where my in-laws and my parents were in the hospital and they shouldn't have been there. Like that just wasn't the right answer, but people, you know, ended up there's a a crisis and we're going to go to the ER, but there's really nothing they can do for them. And so I think that the right, like palliative care model, like Aspire, ended up keeping being having a more sane last year for the patient, the caregiver, giving them like virtual support and comfort, and and then lower the cost for the system dramatically because so much is spent in the last year of a person's life in America that ends up being wasted. Really, it's not good for the patient. It's not good for the system, and I think that is like the win-win-win where and it's good for the payer, they're saving money, it's good for the system, they're saving money, but most importantly it's good for the patient and the caregiver, in terms of the kind of care and the family. So you know that's certainly, I would say, one example of an area that's just like hugely impactful.
For sure. And looking back over the last 20 years, what are a couple things you have seen, the biggest changes you've seen in the venture capital industry? And you have said you will always try to be ahead of things. So what do you see? What are the couple things you see shaping the industry over the next 10 years?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think if you think the pivots in the past, I mean, we talked about, some pivot and, like why in biotech, and then, literally biotech came back, years later. but it took about a decade. The advent of the internet, obviously that was the biggest change, but like then how do you play that in your industry? Fintech, fintech, nobody knew what fintech was in 2002. It wasn't really a term, and yet you had established financial, services, uh, principally banks, some credit bureau, facilities. Um, but there wasn't anything consumer friendly, in the, truly consumer friendly and experience. Credit cards was as modern as they got. Um, and so we certainly recognized that, took advantage of it, invested in it. I think fast forward to today, there almost cannot be too much hype about Gen AI. It is moving so fast. And it will, I mean, this will be, my life's work in the last 20 years has been about lowering cost and improving quality and patient experience in healthcare. And it has been a slog. And I would say, we have certainly improved software, we've improved some care delivery and services, but this will be the moment. I am the most excited about the next 10 years because this is the moment where with Gen AI, you can literally leverage healthcare professionals such that primary care docs and specialists, which are needed but in shortage, can be leveraged so that a much less trained individual can be using Gen AI, and one get the diagnosis and treatment recommendations that today are as good or better than doctors and some of the best specialists out there. And so I do think that you're going to augment, you're not going to, like replace all these doctors. You are going to augment what they're doing and have them focused on the most complex and difficult problems and be able to spend more time with the patients that really need them because we are going to be able to leverage them with lower level resources that can use these tools that are going to dramatically lower the cost of the system. And administratively, just too, like we spend $500 billion a year on revenue cycle management, basically claims and billing in healthcare.
Yeah.
500 billion. It's like, it's insane. I mean, that can be completely streamlined. So, when Doge is looking for savings, I mean, I do think that if we get it right, there's going to be a lot of savings in healthcare, and we have to make sure that that the American public actually benefits from that. That we lower the cost for everyone. So that I am truly excited about higher quality care given more broadly. I mean, just think about it. If you're if you have cancer and you're not within 90 miles of a major healthcare system or go to one, you are not going to know about 90% of the treatments that are out there. I have them.
Yeah.
There's just no way an oncologist in rural America can actually know everything that's going on. But now with virtual, like virtual care given by oncologists, MSK or others, along with AI, you can one, advantage the oncologist that's local to know so much more, and two, leverage the skills and capabilities of those that live in major metropolitan areas around some of these major cancer centers. So you are gonna up level the quality of the care for patients across America and the world.
And over the last, you guys focus both on fintech and healthcare, and over the last 10 years, fintech and healthcare have had an increased overlap. How has your approach to investing in both of these been changed or been influenced by the increased overlap?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, in fintech, I would say it's interesting. It's the first time healthcare is actually using Gen AI more often. It's more incrementally valuable in healthcare, but it's going to be very certainly valuable in fintech also because everything should be built, right? And the reality in developing software, in developing websites and marketing, companies are going to be built much more efficiently than they were before because of using these tools. And I would say what's happened if you just think it's been a slow process because of the compliance issues of change of behavior in fintech from people's, with their money, it's your generation that's going to be so much more comfortable with everything virtual, like never going to like a bank. I mean, it's already happening, but the reality is there have been barriers, even in the state of Connecticut. I mean, it's crazy because we got lawyers in the legislature. They don't want to lose on $1,000 fee in a mortgage. closing. But right now you can do a digital closing there where that legal work is literally done, the underwriting. So in the app, and would save everybody $1,000, but you do have people preserving their jobs and their incomes, which I totally appreciate, not allowing that. So there's just this friction along the way when it comes to people's incomes. And we cannot obviously displace, like people, we need to augment them and not displace an entire workforce. But I think there's just is, there's resistance with anything that, takes away income from anyone. So we're getting there. I would say right now we're finding more opportunity in LATAM for, crypto, stable coins, and LATAM in general is building the digital infrastructure that we now have in America. And so, our last 4 deals were all in LATAM in fintech.
Yeah. I think this era is a very interesting kind of time for me and my generation to live in because you see the emergence of AI, you see blockchain, you see all this stuff. It's the start of what looks like the kind of the next era of technology and everything.
It's 100%. No, your generation is coming into the most incredibly exciting time. I mean, just behavior change is going to be unlike anything we've seen because you're going to just take away so much friction in so many things. You're not going to have to, all you're going to do is, like not do things you didn't want to do, so.
Exactly. And I want to shift a little bit to some of your insights and advice you give to the younger generation. But first, who are the best entrepreneurs you've ever met or invested in, and why are they the best entrepreneurs you've ever met or invested in?
Well, certainly the first two, Steve Jobs, but I would say, so in our world, in healthcare and fintech, I would say, Athena Health was founded by Jonathan Bush and the Park brothers. Todd Park went on to found Castlight, and then Eddie and Todd founded Devoted, and Devoted is a company that's, I'm not going to go into long description, but it's Medicare Advantage plan completely re-engineered from bottom up, and it has a provider group also, essentially virtual and primary care docs that are being leveraged. And so it's basically a health plan and doctors. It's like Kaiser. People, you've heard of that. It's Kaiser, all virtual, and it's sort of the combination of doctors taking risk on your healthcare with measured by outcomes. And so it is exactly the alignment we should have in our system where it's not fee for service. It's somebody incented to do the right thing so that you have better care and better outcomes and you're paid, and you save money doing it. And that's what they've done. And they've created a multi-billion-dollar amazing company. It's run, Eddie's actually a computer science guy. And it's very like left brain, right brain. Healthcare and tech have not in the past. It's now merging because, like younger generations are so tech savvy that you almost can't not be. When you commit to healthcare, you actually understand tech too. That was not always the case. But they've created an amazing company, and the Park brothers are truly incredible individuals that are always doing the right thing. So to me in healthcare, and I would say this is about Brad Smith too, who created the palliative care company. Aspire has created CareBridge, which is focused on value-based care in Medicaid. We've just sold that company. And the two, I would say the similarities between those entrepreneurs is that their belief and care about improving people's lives, that they're in healthcare as a mission, and what they're going to do is lower costs for the system and improve healthcare outcomes. And they truly care about that. And you can make a lot of money as a byproduct of doing it, as opposed to like, yeah, let's go into healthcare to make a lot of money. No, it's really hard. Healthcare is really hard to change. So go do something else. And so I think they care about it deeply. They're intensely focused. They care about the humans that work for them. They are exactly what I described before, incredibly confident but not arrogant, ask a million questions. People want to work with them and for them. They're winners. They are just winners. People want to follow what they're doing, and they make them believe in the mission. And I think that's incredibly important for really any company, that they've got different missions. Elon was about creating, SpaceX and going to space and creating the best, EV car at one point. So people do have to care about what they're doing and believe in you and that you're going to be successful. And so that is all part of it.
And I love your point about they have their mission and they're making money as a byproduct. And I also think a lot of people, especially in today's world and in my generation, think of a lot of investors. Well, there's many different areas in investing, but they think of many people as making a lot of money and taking advantage of the average person. But I think you're a perfect example of someone who you're focused on improving quality and lowering costs for people, and you also make money for your investors as an outcome of it. So that's why I think this is a very valuable episode that I'm going to share with a lot of my peers, that my peers should listen to. But zooming out over your career, you've been through a lot of market cycles: the dot-com bubble, the great financial crisis, COVID. What are the biggest lessons you've learned from navigating those downturns, and how do you apply them today?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the lessons are that mistakes are repeatable, and they're, I mean, in terms of the dot-com bust, and 2008 was a little bit different, but let's just compare the dot-com bust with actually 2021, 22, in that prices got overheated. People got sloppy. It wasn't just entrepreneurs, it was the investors, in these companies. And there's the question is, when that happens, what do you do? Like, that's the test, right? And so I think, for us, it's hunkering down, working with these entrepreneurs, making sure they are that they have a sustainable model and cash to get there, to get through the crisis. And the one lesson is always cut once, cut deep, and then build back. And so often people, like entrepreneurs, I mean, it's very hard to lay off people or to cut costs in general. But the problem is it's not good for anybody or the enterprise or the people in it to have like subsequent layoffs. I mean, by the third one, nobody believes in the company or that there's not going to be another one. So you've destroyed, the morale. So you want to cut once, you want to like then move forward. Say, okay, we're good. We're gonna have money to get there and keep moving. The other, I think, issue as an investor is it, goes back to, I think it's Warren Buffett's statement, when others are greedy, be fearful. When others are fearful, be greedy. Like, don't forget, that's the moment. Like, good companies are created every day. Like, do not be afraid, and it's very hard when you're like focused on like making sure your company survive to like be enthusiastic and, excited, but you have to stay in the game, and see what's coming next. And I think the amazing thing was, it was literally like Silicon Valley was in this massive depression in 2022. And then it was like, at the end of like early 23, it's like, oh my God, Gen AI, like, there was this whole thing happening underneath at that moment that obviously perked people up, but also one had to like focus on what's next, because there's always a next. You cannot. But what I love about my business is I don't focus on the market gyrations every day. I'm just building fundamentally good companies, and that'll work over the long run. And you have to, and especially like for your friends coming out of high school, then coming out of college, for my own children who are, in their 30s, they're watching the markets, crash, and oh my God, what do I do? And I think the reality is you got to take a long-term perspective. And I'm a fundamental investor. I'm building companies. So you just have to make sure they survive and have the right amount of capital and are using that capital wisely towards the right markets. And whatever noise is going on around that, like, forget it. And the macro market doesn't really even matter. I mean, we've done our best sometimes when markets are in recession, because then people they're focused on lowering costs, and then we're providing the tools and services to lower the cost, for people. So it's just an interesting phenomenon, and I think that's the thing. It's like, just always know that the crisis will end, and America always comes back. It's just it's a beautiful thing. And it's why we're the most resilient economy in the world. It's absolutely amazing that we are still, I think we have as much or higher GDP as a percent of the world economy as we've ever had. And the reality is everybody's just assumed, China and others would be blown by us by now. It was Japan that, I don't know, 70s, 80s that everybody was worried about. And Japan has been stagnant for 30 years now. So.
Yeah. And final two questions. How can students looking to build a career in venture capital stand out?
I think you have to decide that it's really what you want to do, right? I mean, and some people are going to figure out, I would have experiences working inside small companies. I would try to, like get internships as people get older inside the investment world, but I would get exposure to the operating world. And if you are convinced, like, you're pretty convinced you want to be an investor and not an operator and manage people. I didn't want to manage a lot of people in life. I sort of like focus on ideas. Then then I honestly, you either go to an environment where you get exposure to that from an operating perspective, try to get into the industry and understand the tech world or understand healthcare or understand if there's a sector of the industry you have a passion about, go deep in that, get to understand it, get exposure. And, like right out of college, unfortunately, people get channeled. And I would say, if you want to be a growth, we do venture and we do growth and we do recruit a lot of people. I'm afraid to say it, out of banking programs. And so, these investment banking programs are, they are helpful. But you do have to get on that early. And I would say that, male and female, like that's something you probably need to decide by your junior year in college. And so that's just a fact. Now, that is not how everybody gets in the venture industry. A lot of people get into early stage venture by being operators and going into tech companies. So you can do that too.
And one final question we ask all of our guests. If you could give one piece of advice to your 15-year-old self, what would it be?
Just do what you did, because it worked out pretty damn great. I don't know, just have confidence that life will work out, and enjoy it along the way.
And for
And
a 15-year-old today?
surround yourself. Yeah, surround yourself with great people. Like just like eliminate toxicity. Eliminate toxicity in your world, like just surround yourself with great people that are inspired and positive. Just just learn, just love learning.
Well, thank you very much, Annie. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I think people will learn a lot from it. And it's also been a very unique conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your asking. Enjoyed it. I look forward to meeting you in person someday.
Likewise. Thank you.